Board of Education to order. If you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to ask our secretary when he arrives if we have any correspondence. This will be a time for any comments from the public. Anybody wish to make a public statement? All right, seeing none. We have a couple of special recognitions this evening, and I think I'm going to turn it to Jamie to start this off.
Sure.
Jamie Gent.
This is a little late, but a year. But we have 3 awards for some seniors from last year's class who we were going to do in the spring, and then we decided we'd catch them in the fall, and then they went on to college and did things. So we decided to catch them this spring because everybody's back in town, which is good. But we have 3 seniors from last year's class and 1 senior from this year's class. We will start with wrestling first, and Mr. Sam Bird and Zach Krim.
What's that? Well, it's kind of cool, because then we can find out what they're doing, too.
Oh, this, okay. I haven't had a chance to see this, but I want to read this one. It's real nice, Zach. Very nice. Just briefly, a few things about Zach. You can step up a little bit. As a coach, he is the coach's dream. Was a coach's dream for me, and he's now wrestling at MSU. But just a great kid, just absolutely dedicated, hardworking, and just driven to succeed and to win. And he was one of the most exciting wrestlers that I've ever coached. It never mattered if he was ahead or behind. You just knew if there was a way. He would find a way to win, and often in very exciting fashion. He would wrap it up, and as I said, whether he was ahead or behind, he'd find out a way, and usually it ended in a pin. He holds the pin record for us and a lot of other records. It's unusual for some of the lighter guys to be such pinners, but he was just such a competitor that was his forte. He pinned people. He did everything that could be done as a wrestler. I just listed off a few things. He was a conference champ, a district champ, a regional champ, a 4-time state qualifier, and a 3-time state placer. Senior year, he was 56-2 with 37 pins. He was a 3-time captain, which I think gives you an idea of the kind of leadership, even as a young wrestler, that he portrayed. He was also a 3-time MVP, which is very unusual. Because we had some good older wrestlers, but again, he was very competitive. He found ways to score lots of points. He holds team records for, these are career records, for most wins with 184, most pins with 124. And more importantly, he is a great person. And as much as I value all of his records and things, what I value most is the example that he set for the younger wrestlers. It was a huge influence, very, very positive influence. When Zach came in, we had a few guys that didn't have the work ethic that Zach had. But by the time he was done, everybody had that kind of work ethic that we expect and the kind of character that we expect out of our wrestlers. So Zach, I want to congratulate you on a great career and present you with this award. I'll read, you want me to read these? Okay. MHSAA, these, Zach Krim, 125 pounds, 2009. MHSAA final meet, 3rd place, All-State Class B. Michigan High School Wrestling Coaches Association, 2008. MHSAA final meet, 4th place, All-State Class B. And presented by the Michigan High School Wrestling Coaches Association. 2007, 7th place, All-State Class B. Haslet Board of Education salutes your athletic accomplishments. Your perseverance for excellence and dedication to your school and community are admired and respected. May your athletic records serve as an inspiration to all Haslett students today and into the future. Congratulations.
All right. Well, first I'd like to thank the school board for recognizing me with this honor, and everybody at Haslett was always really supportive of you know, all of my endeavors. And we're not really known as a wrestling school, but everyone here did everything that they could, you know. And I really, there's not a room in the state I could have gotten better than in the Haslett room. Coach Bird was great to me, and he surrounded me with lots of really good assistant coaches too, and talented guys who got me to where I am today. So, thank you.
Thanks, Zach.
Steve Blatter, we'll have Brad James.
Okay, it's my honor to be here to honor Brad tonight. My first time meeting Brad about 5 years ago, he was about that high. He's trying out for my freshman basketball team. And it's been just an honor to watch this young man develop into who he is today. Had just a phenomenal track season a year ago and his junior year as well. Some of the accolades that he was able to gain last season. Sorry, kind of freezing. Runner-up in the indoor state meet. He took the runner-up in the Midwest Meet of Champions last summer. He was the Greater Lansing Greater Lansing Dream Team for the high jump, and qualified his senior year for both high jump and long jump, and was the state champion last year for Division II at the height of 6 feet 10 inches. And lucky enough to continue his career at University of Michigan. His best jump was last year was as a high schooler 6'10", and he's already bumped that up 3 inches, and he's jumped over 7'1" this year. So really, really, really excited to see what the next 4 years, he redshirted this year. So what the next 4 years have for Brad, and you know, without too much more being said, you know, might be able to see this young man as a Olympic caliber type of an athlete here in the next 4 years. So. Brad, congratulations. And, there you go. Thanks.
Thank you. I didn't really know I was going to have to say anything, so I just appreciate the school board for recognizing all of us and what we did throughout the high school, and thanks to everybody that supported us and supported me through high school and even through college. Thank you.
Jeff Buck will talk about Zach Holt.
Before we get into the athletic side for Zach, the thing that stands out to me about Zach is what kind of person he is. He and I have been through a lot together. We found out we had a lot in common from the start when he was little coming up, and that we related very well to each other. What stands out to me most is Zach has made himself, through hard work, into everything he's achieved so far. Whether it be the weight room, whether it be his amazing stuff he did for Brian Town at TV22. Zach is one of the most dedicated, hard-working football players we've had in our program, at least in my 14 years than when I played in this football program in high school. Zach is one of the most dominant defensive linemen I've ever coached. He can do things that you're just not supposed to be able to do at his size. And it was an absolute treat to watch him play. It's been great because I've been able to follow Zach a little bit, kind of like a groupie, following him down to Wayne State where he's at now, and he started as a true freshman. And that's a pretty big deal. In Division II, stepping right on the field immediately. And every game I've watched him, he's made some sort of play to have an impact on the game. And it's kind of amazing to see one of our own move on to the level he's at and achieve the stuff he has. And when Zach, when he left, he was Division III, Detroit Free Press, All-State for defensive line, All-Area Dream Team, defensive lineman, Lansing State Journal, and all leagues. He played center when we had some injuries, but center and defensive lineman for the Capillary Activities Conference. And he was an absolute pleasure to coach and a great young man.
Just want to say thank you to everybody for just recognizing all of us, and I mean, just thanks to everybody who supported me, and I mean, that's pretty much it.
Good job. Thank you.
Before we bring Kimberly up here, I want to remind you that these plaques, there's identical plaques in my office that will go up in the hallway as you come into the gym on the left-hand side. They're there for as long as that building's there. So this is quite a feat for these young people to do, and I'm very glad to be able to be part of it. And now, Mr. Bott.
As you can see, it's such a treat to coach in this district because you just keep getting amazing athletes to work with, so you get to keep talking about them. Kimmy and I have been together since she was a freshman. She came out throwing, and she's not your typical shot putter. She everywhere we went, she's by far the most athletic shot putter wherever we go. To me, Kimmy is what's impressive about high school athletes. She's not just an athlete as far as volleyball and track. She's a dedicated student. She does an amazing job in the classroom, again, in Brian Town's media class, and just overall in her academic quest there at Hazel High School. She did such an amazing job, and to me that's more important than any of the sports stuff, as we all know, and that was always first with Kimmy. I don't know how many times we had meets and Kimmy's worried about a test. Kimmy's worried about, and that's great to hear. I mean, sports, we're second to high school or academics, and that's what we're all here about. And as far as track goes, Kimmy had a season that it's going to be hard to top as far as throwing goes. She had an undefeated outdoor season. She pretty much every time we had a track meet won on her first throw. It wasn't very competitive most of the year because she's that darn good. And she set some first here at Hazel High School. She's broke her own school record at least 6 times this year, every last few years. And she was our first. She had some firsts for us as far as throwing goes. She's the regional champ for Division II. She won that on her first throw. She's our first female thrower to ever win the honor roll meet. And in my opinion, the honor roll meet in this area with the athletes we have is just as impressive as a state meet. And she kind of won that dramatically, and it was a pretty amazing experience. And then the Division II state meet, which she did win on her last throw. So she kept it interesting all year, but she is an amazing young lady, and it's really hard to let her go. I got to start fresh, but that's okay. That's what it's all about. But she's been such a treat to coach, and I'm going to miss her.
Just like everyone else, I'd like to thank all of you guys for presenting us with these. They're beautiful and awesome to keep around and remember what we've done in high school. And also thanks to Coach Bott. He has taught me everything I know and made me the thrower I am. And of course, parents to support us through all of our high school career and be there at all of our meets. I think that's it. Thank you.
So, Kimmy, Zach, and Brad, congratulations. Some of you are a little overdue, but seriously, congratulations, and to the families for all your work in supporting them. It is not lost on me, Jamie, that might be your last time at the podium for us, so just a big thank you to you for all your leadership in this district for so long. That was a pretty good way to finish, yeah? I'm going to turn it now to Superintendent Duda for the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you, President Fowler. Just like to begin by congratulating the high school staff, Principal Bart Wajenke, Associate Principal Darren Ferguson, and Associate Principal Andrea Rumsey for a successful graduation this past weekend. And it was a well-organized commencement ceremony, and all the end-of-the-year activities went off without a glitch. So it's a lot of work, and I want to thank the staff for all of their good hard work. And then we've got some additional retirements. As you know, the last board meeting I reported on some retirements. We've had some additional since then. Marianne Freeland, Murphy counselor, who served the district for 33 years. Jan Slaw, middle school video productions teacher, has served the district for 32.5 years. Linda Lilly, Murphy 5th grade teacher, who served the district for 30 years. John Moore, high school math teacher, who has served the district for 28 years. Greg Lindsay, band teacher, served the district for 27 years. Sandy Smoker, middle school resource teacher, who served the district for 26 years. Kathy Van Ravensway, speech language therapist, who served the district for 26 years. And Jackie Hill, technology secretary, who has served the district for the last 21 years. And then finally Sharon Rushkamp, our ESL teacher, who has served the district for 21 years. And I want to thank all of those employees for all of their service over the years, and best of luck and wishes in the future. And then finally, the foundation for the Hazlet Public Schools golf outing is this Friday, June 18th at Meridian Sun, and I believe that kicks off late morning, 11 o'clock, noon, and then carries on into the afternoon. So if you're looking for a good time, please turn out and support the foundation. And then I've got Brian Town here who would like to address the board with regards to a certification with the Apple Computer Company.
I know how to clear a room, don't I?
Yeah. Usually Steve gets to follow all the really great students.
Too bad because Zach and Kimmy were both really, I mean, obviously Zach and Kimmy was in my advanced class too, and this is not, but I did bring a student as well. Wanted to talk to you real quick about two things. Number one, you'll see a book. There's a couple of them. I just thought I'd show you what those are. They're Final Cut Pro 7. Thanks to the Vicki Hoisington Fund and also the foundation and also our budget. Over the last couple of years, I was sent out to San Francisco, or Cupertino, yeah, really rough place to go, to get certified to be an Apple Pro certified trainer. Okay, and what that means is Final Cut Pro is the software that we use to edit all of our films. And why that's important is because it's the #1 software used everywhere across the world to edit film and TV. 9 out of the top 10 Academy Award films, documentaries, were edited on Final Cut Pro. And it's the same exact software that I'll show you in a second. I'm not going to take much time, but we've got 13, 14, 15-year-olds and 17 and 18-year-olds that are experts on this equipment. And just a couple quick stories about how this has helped them in their careers. Liz Deshane, who was a student of mine last year, 2 years ago now, was able to, she's going to University of Michigan for engineering, but she ran across somebody at the school there and heard the word Final Cut Pro, and she's like, I know how to use Final Cut Pro. And she got a job making 10, 12 bucks an hour doing that. Wow. And so we've also got a lot of students right now, probably 10 to 20 who are in the business, and then we've got another 10 or 15 that are actually in school for this. Why is it important that I'm a certified trainer, and why should we spend the money, or why did we spend the money to send me out there, is because we'll be one of the only, I think we are the only Apple certified training center for education in the state of Michigan and a high school. There are a few around the country. Hollywood High School is one of them, obviously. But what does that mean for our students, and what's it mean is that now I can give this certification test on Final Cut Pro 7 to our students. They can walk out of Hazlet High School with a certification that says they are a certified end user. And also another story, Neil Brower, who was a student of mine, he's went to LCC, then he transferred to Grand Valley. We've got a real stream of students going to Grand Valley, and our name is recognized there. He was able to test out of 2 classes because of his skills on this. The certification that they'll get will save them, not only save them money, but also give them something for their resume. To take a course with a certified trainer, the closest place is Novi, and it's, I think, $680 for a 3-day course, plus another $150 for the test itself. At Hazlet, it doesn't cost them anything. The test itself does cost $50 for the center, and we can then, we haven't done it yet, we can then choose to charge the students or not. And we haven't done it yet because we're not quite there yet. Yeah.
Well, can we be an outside profit center?
Well, that's something else that, unfortunately, right now, we're the only, you can only train your staff or students that are part of your school system. But I'm working with Apple right now to see if we can do it Ingham County-wide, ISD-wide, so that we can be a center for the ISD. I sent a big chunk of paperwork to Apple 2 weeks ago, and we're waiting for the yes. I don't think there's any issue. It just seems to take them a little longer than I thought it would. But a very cool thing for our high school to have that. It would be nice if we could train outside people, but if you're a center for education, you can't train the private because they don't want to compete with Novi, they don't want to compete with Detroit, things like that. So you can either be an Apple Certified Center for Education or an Apple Certified Center. And so I'm able to give that certification to our staff and students. And Josh Headley is here, and Josh is going to be our guinea pig. As soon as we're, but Josh will be able to pass it with his eyes closed, I think. We hope. The difficulty in the test, and I've taken all of them, and I've taken the trainer test, which is the next level up, is that it's closed book and closed app. And closed application means that you are in front of a computer, but you can't open the software. So think about Microsoft Word. If somebody said, hey, do you know what menu is cut, copy, and paste on Microsoft Word? If you were able to move the mouse and check, you'd probably be able to get the answer right, but you can't do that. And so that's why Josh is going to be our test pilot to see how it works. These guys know Final Cut pretty well. I've run into a lot of, over the last 3 or 4 years, a lot of professionals, a lot of adults, and our kids, I mean, they can't hold a candle, our kids. They're really fast and really good. And what they do, the process is they read that book, sort of, outline it. Well, I'll let Josh talk about what you did, I guess, sort of, and where you're going and what your process is going to be to take the test, I guess.
All right, I've been working through the book, Final Cut Pro 7, that you guys have for the majority of the year, along with Mr. Thomas giving me tons and tons of information about the program and about Apple that will help me take this test. He has stuff online on his website that is quiz questions, internet tests, everything that will help me prepare myself. I'm going to use this to advance myself before I go into college and go into the field. I plan on studying film, cinematography, film editing all through college along with business. And I believe this will give me a head start on most of the other people I will encounter while I'm in college and after college in the field of creating film.
One of the things that we're really pushing at the Vision right now is this whole Michigan initiative to try to keep everything local and keep the money in locally, and also the big film business that's here. We've talked about that for a while, and it's really starting to pick up. You know, it's going to take some time too, but you know, we're trying to get these kids to understand that entrepreneurial sort of sense where they can you know, really have skills that can take them to places and also make them a lot of money. And you know, the kids that we have, as you know, at the Vision have always been some of the best kids, I think, in the district, and it's been kind of cool to hear the stories and see how that network has grown over the last few years. And this is just one avenue that I think is really cool about the Vision and what we're able to do. But you know, without kids like Josh, I mean, he's just really excited about it. And he's, you know, when I do trainings outside of here and stuff, I usually take a kid or two to help me. He's gone to conferences with me, and he gets paid. And I need him there because I can be up front teaching and he can walk around and help adults and high school students as well. So really good job. So the Apple Authorized Training Center just gives us so much more that we can actually give the students with when they leave Haskell. So, you know, how many do we hope to turn out? You know, I have anywhere from 25 to 30 in my advanced class. I'd like to tell you all of them, but some of them don't want to. And so if we can turn out, you have to turn out 5 a year. You have to get certified for 5 students a year, which that won't be a problem. And then former students, I think, can come back, but we're going to see how that works as well. And I could teach you guys in and out. You guys could edit on Final Cut Pro. Guarantee you.
In and out. I might do it.
If you could cut, copy, and paste in Microsoft Word, you can edit on Final Cut Pro. But a lot of other people seem to struggle with it, but not our guys. They do a really good job. So that's one thing I wanted to show you. And just real quick, one other thing that's kind of cool, and I was hoping I could stream the board meeting tonight, but for some reason, Andrew and I have been talking about it, it's not picking up the board signal yet, but we'll have that fixed by the next board meeting. Something cool about graduation, if you didn't know, we had a student, we streamed the graduation ceremony live for the first time. And it was really cool. We had like 12 viewers, because I didn't want to announce it to everybody, because I didn't know if it worked. But it did work, and Caitlin Hudgens, whose sister graduated, was in Spain, and she got to see her sister graduate.
Oh, that's cool.
So it was very cool. And how you can find that is just go to our website, hasavision.com, or you can just go to the school. It's the same thing. And we're working with 2 different companies right now, and they're free. Joel, who will be working for me this fall, is taking a look at some other ones right now. But we thought that it would automatically kick over to the board meeting, and it didn't for some reason. But it did do that at the Breslin Center. But if you just go to our website, you can either just hit play there, and you can get this anywhere in the world. And the connections here is a little slow, but it seems to work okay. And there's a live stream of our channel. And so that's a free service. The only thing that's the downfall of this free service right now is their ads that are on there. But we're talking to them too to see how we can get those ads to make revenue for the station. So
this is what's on right now.
This is the vision. Yeah. This is the vision. So anywhere in the world, you don't have to worry about Comcast. Shouldn't say that too loud. You don't have to worry about having that signal anymore. And all we have to do is switch a couple cables so that no matter what's live on the TV channel, should be live on Ustream. We really haven't promoted this a whole lot because it is a free service and it's not 100% always on. But if we're keeping a close eye on it, we can keep it going pretty good. And the signal looks great. I mean, you can blow it up to full screen and it still looks pretty good. Our telethon worked pretty good, but that's what she was watching in Spain live from the Breslin Center. And all I did was bring my little laptop, my black laptop that we have at the Vision, and connect it to the wireless signal and plug a cord in, and we were good to go, and it worked. So that was pretty exciting. So we will let you know. I mean, our goal is to launch this to everybody. I mean, it's launched to everybody right now, but officially say, yes, it works in the fall. So that games, concerts, everything that's actually live on the channel will be streamed live on the internet as well. So.
Think how happy you're making grandparents all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wish I could have announced it more because I had a couple of parents, or a student of mine, Rashay, said, hey, my dad wants a copy of graduation, can he get it? And I said, yeah, and that's what, and then I was sitting there at home and I texted Andrew, I'm like, hey, you think we can go live for graduation? He's like, yeah, I don't see why not. And so we got a hold of Rashay, I said, tell your dad it's on this, you know, and so I wish we would have, but I just didn't want to say it and then it not work.
And then it doesn't work.
Yeah, because that happens to us all the time. So, but anyway, so it's pretty cool, and I will let you guys know when that's going to be full, but it should be. We're going to it's on all the time right now, and it's up there. So anytime, just go to our website and go. And if you guys want to learn Final Cut Pro, we'll let you know when we're doing sessions. We have a middle school class going on right now, middle school film, and we've got 6th graders to sophomores in there.
Great, we have the opportunity to have 6th graders do better than us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be in elementary school too. Yeah. Are you smarter than a 6th grader, Beth?
But we have that film class going on right now, and they'll be editing on Final Cut Pro. And I tell people a lot in the business, I don't think they get it. They think, oh, it's just a high school team. You know, I don't think they really get it. But, you know, we've had kids that, you know, freshmen that, you know, can really do well. And they know computers. And they, you know, it makes it's easy, but there's that whole other stuff before the writing, the shooting, and stuff like that.
Megan's been bragging about being able to use it.
Yeah, she's been, and she was one of my first film class students as well, and that's where she learned it. So
that's wonderful.
Very cool. So thanks for your time.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
That's great, thanks.
Thanks, Corey.
So is that the end of the superintendent's report?
That is
it. Want to make sure we know where we are. I'm going to circle back. Do we have any correspondence, Mr. Secretary?
By chance, we do.
How about that?
We happen to have 2 thank you cards, one from Linda Frederick, the other from Amy, not Amy, it is Becky Smith. Thank you for recognition on the retirement and just well wishes on the school district because they truly enjoyed their careers here. 2 fine ladies.
All right, it's now time for discussion items. The first one is proposed technology purchases. Jeff Casson will take this one.
Well, thank you. Now that school is out, the technology department is gearing up for our season of replacing and upgrading technology in the district. And this year, I'm recommending the purchase of 107 new Hewlett-Packard computers. We're planning on placing 60 of these computers in 2 of our computer labs, a lab at the high school and then a lab at the middle school as well. And then the other 47 computers will be used to replace all of the administrative type computers in the district, which would include the secretaries, supervisors, counselors, and administrators. The computers that we are currently using in those positions are nearly 6 years old right now. So that's where the 170 computers are targeted to go. Not part of this recommendation, because it came under the board amount, is a purchase that we've put in already for 36 refurbished computers this year. This is something new for us, and the computers that we're getting are about a year old from a company that is one of the leading companies of refurbished computers to schools in the country. We're trying this because we're trying to catch up our replacement cycle. Our goal is to replace computers every 5 years, and we've fallen behind a little bit the last year or two because of the budget situation. Other schools in the area have used this company, have purchased the refurbished computers, and have given a good reference for it. And so those 36 computers then will be scattered throughout the district to replace some of our older computers. What we're also doing is some of the computers that we're pulling out of our computer lab, where we're putting the new computers in, those are a little bit better than a few other computers in our classrooms, and so we're going to repurpose those computers in the classroom. What we're going to end up doing is pulling out about 175 computers that are either 6 years old or older. So we will not be back on our cycle where all computers in the district are 5 years old or less, but we're going to be closer than we are today, and certainly closer than we were a year ago. So the recommendation is for 107 new Hewlett-Packard desktop computers, and as I said, on top of that, we're going to get 36 additional computers and pull out 175 of our oldest computers. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Jeff, how many total computers are there?
We have 850 computers. About 800 of those are desktops, and then maybe another 50 laptops scattered throughout the district.
And do you recall on the community survey how they responded to the questions about investing in technology?
Well, technology came out #1 just about in all of the questions, as I recall.
I thought you might remember that as well.
I do. I had to think for me. You almost threw me off there, Rob. But yeah, so it certainly is a priority of the community.
Okay. The questions?
I don't really have a question, but we mentioned it at the, I was at the Finance Committee, and should probably comment that the refurbished ones have a good warranty.
They do. They've got a 3-year warranty. Those computers are, the ones we're getting are probably, well, they're about a year old, and so we're going to get a 3-year warranty. So actually they'll be covered through 4 years of age. The new computers we're purchasing also have a 3-year warranty. So we're actually getting a 3-year warranty on computers that are a year old. So, you know, it's, again, a good warranty and just very good references for the company from other districts in the area. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks,
Thank
Jeff.
you.
And next, Steve Cook on the 2009-10 proposed final budget amendments. And the 2010-11 budget you'll tee up, I understand.
As Rob mentioned, first of all, we're going to talk about the final amendment for the budget year that's closing here in the next couple of weeks, June 30th, our year end, and where we propose to end up at the end of this year. Then we're going to talk about 10-11 for next year. And we're also going to talk about the proposed fee schedule for some of the things that in athletics and music and some other things that we've been talking about over the last few months, and then open it up to question and answers. The good news is that we are proposing a balanced budget for the final amendment for this year. So roughly $26 million budget will close out balance and leave us with about $1.7 million in fund balance, which is what we started at the beginning of the year. So we're hoping that we could potentially see a little positive trend there. We still have some contingency money that we have not spent, but you know, we never know what would potentially come up between now and the end of the year. So conservatively, we're at balance, but we're hoping that that potentially can go in the other direction for the first time in a while. The main adjustments here, overall it's only about a $37,000 increase in revenue. One of the big items is the recognition of the stabilization funds. That's the ARA funds that we got, basically moving the money from state funds to federal funds. And so it's really just a reclassification of that money. Instead of being under state aid, it's under federal funds. So that's really what that big amount is. Other than that, there's just some minor adjustments. We did get some property tax adjustments from prior years. That's when folks get adjustments on the property taxes. We lose property taxes we have to pay back to the jurisdictions, and then we get paid back in later years for state aid for those property amounts that we lost. So they catch up in future years. So that was an adjustment of about $80,000. Some adjustments in property taxes, tuition, some other types of things. We actually now, as required by the state, have to fold in the athletic fund into our general fund. That's a new requirement now this year. And so as we used to have an athletic fund that was separate, and we transfer about $500,000 to the athletic fund, now that's folded into the general fund. So we did make that adjustment this year to recognize that. And when we get into next year's budget, that'll also be as a part of our original budget. We did have some reductions in ISD monies, but overall, just some minor adjustments to the tune of about $37,000. On the expense side, some increased costs for special ed parapros throughout the year that were not recognized in the prior adjustment. We did have some reductions in utilities, mostly on the supply side of what we've been able to cost out for our utilities, both gas and electric. We have continually seen a reduction in usage. One of the things that was just recently implemented was the automatic shutoff of all our computers within the district. After 6 o'clock, all of our computers automatically turn off. Those 850 computers are now off, and so that's hopefully going to give us a little bump for next year. So there's some additional reductions in utilities there. Overall, about $37,000 as we're balancing both on the revenue expense side. Once again, we're ending with about $1.7 million in fund balance. As you can see here, the percentage of our expenditures is actually, it's a little higher due to the fact that our expenditure base is continually decreasing as we make those cuts. So not a big change, but roughly around 6% of fund or total expenditures for the end of the year. So that's really what we're projecting for this year, and then we will vote on that amendment for at the 28th meeting. As we start to look at 10-11, I want to talk a little about the state aid budget, the state school aid fund. Specifically, back in January at the Revenue Consensus meeting, the Revenue Consensus meeting is where both the Senate and the House to come together and they decide on what the numbers are going to look like for the state budget. Back in January, the predictions were for 9-10 that we were going to end out the school aid fund basically at zero, a little positive, about $54 million. But this was the big number that was coming in January, which is roughly $424 million. That equated to about a $260 or so per student reductions that we were anticipating most throughout the spring as we were putting this budget together. And lo and behold, as we got to May, those numbers improved significantly. And so what that basically meant is that because of sales tax revenues and some other adjustments, the school aid fund for the end of this year is projected to be about $350 million to the good, which is obviously a good thing. In addition, as they went to 10-11, there were some additional dollars to end roughly about $560 million at the end of this year. I will tell you, though, that because the House had not passed their version of the bill, they actually used the Senate version when they put these numbers together. So two things to keep in mind here. The general fund contribution, you can see that increase of about $195 million. That was the Senate's version, okay? I don't believe that they're going to be contributing to the school aid fund this year. That'll probably go away. That's about $200 million. In addition, the expense base had the $118 cut that was proposed by the Senate back in March. So if you strip out those two numbers, basically about $400 million between the $118 expense reduction and the general fund contribution, it still leaves about $160 million in the school aid fund projected at the end of 2010-11. The good news is it's positive. And so at this point, as you'll see in a few minutes, our recommendation is that we use a zero foundation allowance increase for next year. The House came out with their version about a month ago, 3 weeks ago, and they actually are talking about potentially adding $65 back to the $165 that was cut in the current year budget year that we're in right now. I doubt that that's going to come through. As you probably have read over the last few weeks, they're already talking about raiding the school aid fund and using it to help balance the general fund, because unfortunately the general fund situation has not improved. And so they're about $300 million short, and so they're talking about potentially transferring some of the money to the school aid fund, or from the school aid fund to help the general fund. So all bets are off, I think, is where this fund's going to end up. Hopefully they won't take any of that money, but that could happen for a short-term type of fix. The other thing that they're talking about doing is the stabilization fund, is potentially saving that money and pushing it out into 11-12, because if the picture doesn't improve, then they'll have some savings for the ARA fund. So we don't know where this is going to end up. At $160 million, potentially less than that, depending upon what they do with the general fund. But we're basically assuming at this point that we're going to get a zero foundation allowance increase. That could change. If that does change, we'd have to make some type of adjustment, like we did probably over the summer before school year starts. The state's been hoping and talking about passing a budget before the end of June, but we have not seen any movement there. And as you remember, last year it was October 22nd before they actually passed the budget. So you know, we won't really know what's going to happen probably until later in the summer. It's also an election year, so they make the numbers look good, and then after they get elected, then the numbers magically change. And so, not to say they do that on purpose, but that's generally how that works. And so,
become so cynical.
So you know, that's what we're paid to do, is to be cynical. But so we're trying to be as conservative as we can when we look at those numbers. So as we look at the assumptions, as I mentioned, a zero per pupil increase, we feel that's pretty safe. Most of the districts statewide are using that in our area as a conservative, safe bet. Enrollment, that's a big number, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. A blended enrollment decrease of about 88 students. It's about 100 student loss when you look at fall to fall. The majority reason of that is because of our graduating senior class of only about 240, and then the incoming kindergarten at this point is about 160. So there's about an 80 student swing from what's going out and what's coming in. Now that could change with school of choice, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. That helped us last year. That's part of when you look at where we're actually projecting the numbers, that we could potentially see some changes. Wage increase of 0%. We have negotiations for financials only for all of our groups this summer, so we'll see where that ends up. That's what we're starting with. Salary step increases of 1.5%. That's what that equates to, about $250,000 that we have to pay just for employees moving up on the salary schedule. Retirement rate increase, currently at 2.4% increase. The Senate bill that was passed talked about reducing, or at least lowering that impact to 17.08%. When the retirement incentive plan passed, that we'll talk about in a minute, they didn't address the retirement rate, and the House version that came through has not also addressed the rate. You've probably heard that initially there was around 50,000 retirees that were, quote, eligible for the retirement. At this point, I think the numbers are only around 16,000 that have actually taken it. So what that potentially could mean is that this rate could be reduced depending upon where they end up in those numbers. Employees are going to have to pay an additional 3% starting July 1st to help pay for this plan, and in addition this rate. So you got both the employer side and the employee side both having larger contributions into the fund. And so once those numbers settle and they're able to judge where that fund is going to be, this number could be reduced, which you'll see in a moment could help our deficit balance that we're proposing at this point.
You're going to answer that question?
Yes.
About what it would, okay.
Potential. It's $350,000 to us right now, that 2.47%.
The difference between the 19.4
and what we're currently paying right now. Health insurance increases for the first time in, I believe, 6 years. We actually had double-digit increases of about 11 to 12%. We have caps in our contract. That's about $225,000. So employees will have to absorb the addition over 9%, which ranges from about $50 to $60 per month. They're currently paying $90, so they're going to have to pay somewhere around $150 a month in addition, or $50 to $60 more than they're paying now. So it's about $150 to $160 more. So when you add in the 3% hit on retirement, and this that additional copay represents anywhere between 1% and 2% depending upon what employee groups. So they're looking at anywhere between 4 to 5% decreases in total compensation for our groups for next year before we look at the 0% right there. So employees are going to feel a pinch of in their salaries and benefits for next year. Our initial proposed budget, and we'll talk about this in a minute, is actually in a deficit position. We're proposing this for a couple of reasons. One, enrollment, we're not really sure where enrollment's going to be at this point. Last year we got a bump to the tune of about 60 students over what we were projecting. School of Choice just closed last week, and our numbers are a little ahead of where they were last year. Overall, we have about 130 new students that have applied to School of Choice. Tomorrow we're going to be meeting with principals to review all those students and see where those numbers are going to be. We probably won't know that for a week or so. And so as we look at presenting this budget, we decided to present a deficit budget because we knew there's a couple factors that are still hanging out there that we haven't got resolution on. One of the other big pieces is retirements. Included in this budget were only the people who retired or that announced retirement in April. We had 4 teachers that gave us their letters in April. We've since had 9 teachers in addition to that. So we have 13 currently that are going to be retiring this year. So that hasn't been taken into effect of what those amounts are going to be. Unfortunately, a large due in part that we had to have this budget together a week ago, and we just, the deadline was just on Friday, and we had someone that came in at 5 o'clock on Friday. So we're still working through what those staffing numbers are going to look like and how that's going to potentially help us on the expense side, because as you know, hiring a new teacher or recalling a teacher, which we'll talk about in a minute, we're recalling all of our laid off teachers as a part of this budget plan. We're not sure where they'll fall on the salary schedule and what that'll do, as opposed to someone leaving at the top step and someone coming in near the bottom when we replace or recall a teacher from layoff. So that hasn't been factored in. Tomorrow we're meeting with principals to put together the final plan for staffing and decide exactly how many positions that we'll have open. At this point, we had 5 teachers that we offered recall. 2 of them have declined it, and so we have 3 teachers that are coming back, but we do have additional positions on top of that. I believe we have 4 positions or 5 positions. Sharon, help me out here, I think.
4.5.
4.5. So we'll be posting potentially 4.5 teaching positions over and above the 3 that were recalled. So assuming that we get those folks in at the bottom step, we don't know, because a couple of those are special ed teachers, and it's always difficult, depending upon what the specialty is, to get brand new teachers to come in and do special ed. One of the potential vacancies is an EI room at the middle school, and those are very difficult rooms to manage. And so whether we get a new teacher or we get someone in the middle with experience, we don't know what that's all going to.
So the 2 caveats are
enrollment
and
staffing.
And so the presumption here is 130 or 160 new, 240 going out. 160 kindergartners.
Yep, 160 kindergartners and 240 graduating seniors. So that's about 80.
So loss of 80. And
then there's.
But we have a list of 130 applications for schools of choice.
Mm-hmm. Now,
how many of those are kindergarten and first grade?
Kindergartners like 48. So those are already included in the 160. Okay, so really when you factor that out, we're probably down to anywhere between 70 and 80. And then of those 70 and 80, we're not sure that we'll take all of those, because there may be more than we have as a part of what we opened and offered. Plus, we do review of those students to make sure that if they have some type of suspension or discipline problems, that we may or may not decide to take them. So we're not sure where those numbers are. You know, we could get a boost. We're probably going to get a boost. We just don't know what that number is going to be. And rather than put that out there right now, we want to be as accurate as you can when we put that together. That's a little unusual for this year, because normally we'd have those numbers already put into the budget. And rather than go out and make cuts to page 2 and then have to restore that back once we get our figures, that's why we're proposing the $437,000. We do have a plan to reduce all of that if we need to. If we don't get the School of Choice kids and we don't get well, we know there's going to be savings on retirement. We just don't know what that's going to be. The other piece on retirements is there's a severance piece that when a teacher retires, we have to pay off years of service and those types of things, and that can range anywhere between $12,000 and $15,000 per teacher. And so that expenditure right now is anywhere between $175,000 and $200,000 that we have to pay out that we didn't have. So you get some savings on the salary schedule, but you have to pay out for the separation allowance or the years of service recognition. So we're still working through those numbers. We know that we're going to have a positive effect, but we don't know what that number is going to be at this point. So
but that severance is just this.
It's a one-time deal. It's a one-time deal. Yeah, that's correct. So if in fact the world didn't change and we did only well, we had 437,000. That would bring our fund balance down to 1.2 million. But like I said, we're going to, before the end of the summer, we're going to have that eliminated through either positive adjustments on the revenue expense side or some reductions that we have to make if we need to make those. So what does this mean, at least what we know at this point? The biggest is this blended student reduction. That 88 student equates to about $640,000. We're actually now putting the stabilization money back in because we're not getting as much for the hour dollars. We're not sure where that's going to land. So we've essentially put that money back in. So there again, that's just a shift between the state and the federal revenues. One of the other things that we're doing this year is we've had an ESL program, adult education program in East Lansing for a long time, and we are going to be discontinuing our financial fiduciary relationship with that program at the end of this year. And so part of the budget is the recognition of the elimination of that program. About $370,000 comes in and out. It's a self-supporting program, so we have to take that off our books on the revenue and expense side. The good news is Okemos has agreed to assume that fiduciary relationship for next year. The program is going to continue in the church that it is in East Lansing now, and then Okemos is going to move it to one of their vacant buildings for next year, or for the year following that. And so the good news is the program hopefully will continue, but our financial responsibility at this point is done at the end of this year. We'll close out all the grants, and we'll basically transfer that money over to Okemos, what's ever left over in those grant programs at the end of this year. So as you look at this, there's the adult ed money that we get through the state, these grants, the civics grant, the ABE grant, all of those dollars are that ESL program that we're getting rid of. They also have tuition that they charge, and they have a child care program. So if you add up all those ESL lines, it's about $370,000 that we're making reductions. That property tax adjustment that we had this year, we're taking that out because that's a part of what was in the budget at the end of the year. So just some other minor adjustments for grants and state aid pieces for this year. In addition to that, we're getting a little more in transportation revenue because the collaboration we have with Okemos is now back in our hands where we're doing the full run, and so the ISD pays us a little more money for doing that. It's about $20,000. Registration fees, which we'll talk about in a minute, both the music and athletic fees that we're proposing for next year have an increase there. We have a reduction for the ISD special ed allocation because the property tax base has gone down countywide. Now the pool for special ed is less, and that's what we're initially projecting. That number could change, but at this point it's about a $100,000 decrease over what we got last year. So all in all, about $1.2 million reduction in revenues. On the expense side, these are the things we talked about, the steps, that 1.5%, the FICA, and as a part of that, that 9% cap insurance, about $200,000, and that retirement, that 2.47%. Is about $350,000. So just doing nothing with a 0% increase and paying more in retirement and health benefits is about $800,000. At this point, we're proposing these reductions in the teacher ranks, a small adjustment at the high school. The middle school is the biggest area of reduction, and that has to do with the fact that we have only 170 fifth graders that are now going into sixth grade. That's about a 50 student reduction in the sixth grade ranks, and so they're going to be adjusting their teaming for that, reducing. That's
the class that's been going on.
That's the class. There's actually another class that's also small too that's been weaving their way through, but this is the first class that came through. They're going into sixth grade, so we'll only have 170 sixth graders. So we're looking at reducing 2 teachers at sixth grade because that class is smaller, and there's actually going to be a 2-man team and a 4-man team at sixth grade. In addition to that, we're eliminating the team concept at 7th and 8th grade. So as they had 2 teams at 7th grade and 2 teams at 8th grade, now what we're doing is we're actually having teachers who potentially could cross over grades. They could do 4 sections of math at 7th grade and do 1 section at 8th grade. The other piece that we're changing is the elimination of prime time. That 20-minute block that we used to have at the end of the day is now going to be eliminated, and what we're doing is moving those minutes back into instruction. And so now, instead of having roughly 47, 48-minute classes, we're moving to anywhere between 54 and 55, somewhere in the 50-minute range. We are adding 5 minutes to the very last class of the day so that students have that ability at the end of the day to have a few extra minutes like they did for prime time. So that's the plan, and that's the reason that we're reducing that at middle school. Elementary first grade, because we have smaller numbers coming from kindergarten to first grade, we're proposing to reduce sections there. That 5th grade that's now moving into 6th grade, now we have to add back a section at 5th grade at Ralia because those, we have 4 sections at Ralia instead of 3. So there's an add back there. At this point, our kindergarten numbers are lower than last year, or right about the same, and so we're actually proposing a reduction of a half-time kindergarten section. If the numbers come back, we'll add that section back. That's generally what we've done most of the years as those numbers have improved. We've added back a half-time section. Because of the elimination of some of the 1st grade, we have a less need for some of the specials, art, music, and PE, those reductions. And then we have 2 special ed reductions for special ed teaching positions. One of the main reasons of this is because of our RTI program that we have implemented at both elementary and middle school. We've seen a dramatic reduction in the amount of referrals in special education, mostly in the LD, and in fact, countywide this year, the number is 40%. They've seen 40% reduction in the amount of referrals in special education. So essentially what you're doing is you're moving less kids into special education and using general ed teachers through RTI to help those kids who are struggling. And so they're not labeled as special ed, they're just kids that we've used different methods to try to bring them up to grade level or to give them the deficiencies that they have right now. And so that's been a really positive thing for us. We're hoping to, as those ARA dollars go away at the end of next year, we're hoping to continue that program through our general fund because it's been so successful, obviously reducing in special ed, the amount of special ed teachers.
I just want to reiterate, I think what I heard you say, make sure that everyone understood that with respect to the cuts with the specials, it's no cut in the content or the specials that an elementary child will have. It's just the need for fewer
That's
sections
correct.
because there are fewer classes.
Fewer sections, that's correct. So overall, at this point, the total teacher reductions is 6.65. That's about $630,000. The other staffing reductions, we have the one administrator, the Jamie Gent position, which is being folded in and split up amongst other areas in the district. Mr. Ferguson is assuming the majority of those roles as assistant principal at the high school. Custodians, we're reducing actually 2 half-time custodians, 2 4-hour position, and as you'll see as a part of the resolution to recommend those layoffs, we actually have 2 layoffs in the custodial ranks. Because we had so many teachers retire, we don't have any teacher layoffs at this point. In the area of custodians, we have those 2 4-hour positions. We also had some full-time custodian subs that we had to help for other things within the district, absences and such, and so those positions will be eliminated. And actually, those 2 laid-off custodians will have the ability to fill in those substitute roles that we have now, and so they'll be offered those hours within the custodial ranks. It'll be at a less rate because it'll be sub rate versus what they make as a regular custodian, but they will have the opportunity to work. Secretaries, we're proposing pieces and parts, not only reductions of secretaries here and there, but we're also reducing hours. There's a couple hours reduced at the middle school. There's a reduction of 4 hours in the business office. We also are reducing around a full secretary at the high school. We had 4 secretaries, and now we're only going to have 3 next year. The athletic, because those duties are folded into the assistant principal's job, that the secretaries, Luann, who's that current secretary, is going to move down to the main office. And so there's a reduction net, I think, of about 5 hours at the middle school. We're also reducing secretarial at the tech area, and Jeff Cassins went from, it was an 8-hour position, and it's 7-hour position reduced to 2 hours. So we're combining the community ed secretary position with that position, so that'll become a 6-hour position. So overall, it's about a 2.5 reduction in secretaries. Some of it's hours, some of it's positions. Because we had 3 retirements in secretarial rank, we actually had 3 retirements and 1 resignation, that we're not laying off any secretaries, or we're not proposing any layoffs at this point, although there are some reduction in hours, and that's what you'll see as a part of the resolution, is those positions that did have reductions in hours. Administrative secretary, in this office, we're reducing by 1/3. We do have 2 bus drivers and some reductions of hours for the bus drivers. That's a whole new transportation plan that we're talking about, changing the way that we deliver that service to our community. We did have 1 bus driver retirement late in the year, and so we were originally proposing 2 layoffs, and now we're down to 1. So that's the 1 bus driver is a part of the resolution. So we have the 2 half-time custodial positions, we have the reduced hours for secretary, and then we have the 1 position for the bus driver. So all in all, Total staff reductions of about $1 million between teachers and other support staff. Those ESL expenditures that I talked about before, reduction in utilities, again, mostly because of the pricing, but we're continuously seeing a reduction in usage, and that's about $50,000. Athletic expenses, because that's now folded in the general fund, we're basically reducing those capital outlay and those other types of expenditures for athletics, essentially only funding just the basic needs for athletics, and so there's about a $25,000 cut there. $60,000 of everything else, and roughly about $700,000 in total. So if you put those two together, it's the $1.2 million and the $700,000, that's where we come up about $400,000 short over what we had last year. There again, if we were to just leave everything intact, we'd be down to $1.2 million. We're not proposing to do that, but it is a part of this, at least this proposed amendment. We have to at least show that that's what our fund balance will be at this point, which would bring us down to about 5% at the end of this year. Did you have a question?
Can you go back a slide?
Sure.
So I just want to see what the assumptions are on, we're assuming we're going to take the full retirement increase at 2.7%.
2.47.
Yeah, sorry, 2.47.
And that's really another wild card. You know, we mentioned enrollment and staffing, but that's another piece that could potentially help us. But at this point, you know, we're not assuming any of that right now, and that could be several months before we know what that actually lands at. So.
Right. But that I mean, that would drop to the bottom pretty quickly if they actually were able to
stabilize that rate. Yeah, the Senate bill was 17.08, which was about a 0.3 increase or 0.4 increase. So if we got only that amount of increase, that would reduce that $350,000, which would help us absorb some of that deficit now. And so that's why we're, rather than making the cuts and having additional layoffs in certain areas, we're waiting until we actually get some of those figures and then make those recommendations to the board over the summer. And then we'll put a formal resolution.
So we'll do that as an adjustment or amendment?
Yeah, we'll either do the amendment in the fall or we'll do it in the spring, depending upon if we want to do another amendment in the fall to recognize the changes. This past year, when we did those reductions over the summer, we didn't actually recognize those until February, but they were put in place before the school year started. So, so that's where we are in fund balance. Talk just a few minutes about fees. We are proposing the athletic fees. This is a history of where they've been, but we're proposing for high school from 150 to 200 and middle school from 75 to 100. We're also leaving our family pass flat for this year. We are instituting a new automated system for our family passes for next year, but at this point we're keeping that fee at the same, which is $125 for a family pass for athletics. So that's about $30,000 increase in fees for athletics. We are also proposing for the first time a cap of $400, and so if you have multiple students in the district, the most that you would pay for athletic fees would be $400. And I just want to show, I was able to get today what East Lansing, Okemos, and Williamston is proposing. East Lansing is proposing $275 and $125 with a cap of $650. Okemos, they haven't passed this, but this is what they're proposing, $280 and $170, so with a $500 maximum. Williamston, $180, $75, and $360. So I wasn't able to get Waverly and Grand Ledge. That's the amounts from last year. I assume those amounts are going to go up, but I don't know what they're going to be. So you can see we're very much in the reasonableness as far as what our counterparts and districts around us are charging, and so we feel pretty comfortable with what those fees are in the ranges as well. And all these are one-time fees. All the districts have a one-time fee, so you just pay it once and then you can play multiple sports. And we also have scholarships, so for those student athletes that can't afford to do that, we don't turn anybody away from athletics. If they can prove that they have a financial need to have assistance, then we do provide that for all those students that need it.
So we went out and did a series of community meetings. Mike, you led many of those. We used a number for athletic, cost of athletic and the cost of participation in our music programs in particular.
Yeah, what we looked at
is this higher or lower, I guess?
This is lower. We originally were looking at about 25%, essentially saying that fees had to help, basically had to pay for 25% of the total cost. So of the athletic budget, these fees pay for about, originally we were going to 250, and we went to 200, so it went from 25% to 20%. And that
20% of the salaries.
20% of the total
Just
budget.
the salaries.
So we felt because we went from that 260 cut down to 0 that we decided that we were going to reduce those fees to be more in line with where we thought they should be. That's not to say they might go up in the future, but at least, you know, the impact of the smoothing of those, as you can see, you know, they've been pretty consistent as far as increases go. You know, they're not huge increases. I mean, they are increases, but, you know, roughly $25 per year over the last 2 years. And so, so we wanted to be consistent with that progression.
So when we were talking to community, instead of 200, we were talking 250.
We were talking 250, and we were talking 125.
125.
I believe that was. So we reduced those from what the original amounts were to be. And then I'm just going to quickly go to music. What we're proposing for music is a $40 fee, and this is for anything extracurricular after school that's not a part of the regular curriculum. And I've listed what those activities would entail. And those are jazz band, men's ensemble, select choir, fall musical, and the spring play. And so that would be a $40 registration fee, and they could participate in all of these, any one or more of these particular activities. Interestingly enough, East Lansing, I talked to their finance person, and they're proposing $150 for the similar type of structure. So I feel $40 is, you know, I mean, it's still $40, but compared to at least what some of our counterparts are proposing, it's pretty good. And we also decided not to assess fees on the clubs. We have a few clubs that we do pay for some of the folks that are in charge of those, but we just decided there was so few of them, and it was inconsistent as who paid and who didn't, or who that we paid for some and not the other, and so we didn't want to charge for some clubs and not the other. So we just decided, and there were only a few of them, so we just decided to leave that at current kind of what we're doing currently.
Same question. When we went out and talked to the community, what number were we talking about at that
Well, we were originally looking around $100, I think, is what we didn't come out with a number. And there again, this represents about, that $40 represents about 20% of the total cost. And we looked at, you know, what we have to pay for all of those individuals who we have to pay to perform those particular.
Total cost of salaries.
Total salary is about 20%.
We basically used the same formula.
Same formula, yeah.
With music, so we were consistent.
I mean, it's not a perfect formula, but it's about 20%. So as you look at athletics and music, in order to be consistent with the amounts that we were charging, that's what we tried to be fair amongst athletics and music. So it was about 20%.
Originally, we were looking at $55.
55.
After we had talked about the $100 fee, we reduced it to 55, and now we landed at 40.
So, and we did, both in athletics and music, we did get feedback from the survey that said that parents were willing to pay, and they were willing to pay more than they had paid in the prior year. So, and music, obviously, this is a new thing for us, but we did get overwhelming positive feedback as far as that. So we feel comfortable that these fees are in line with what the community is willing to support. So we feel positive about that.
And they have the ability to scholarship that too.
Yeah, we did, the Vicki Hoisington Fund, they graciously gave that money to the school district to put in a fund to help for anyone who can't be a part of that. We're currently looking for a donor for athletics because right now the general fund basically just absorbs the scholarships. We don't have any fund to dip into, but we're looking at trying to raise some money for the athletic piece of that where we can help subsidize and not have to pay that out of the general fund for those scholarships. But we will offer them the same way that we did for athletics. You know, they have to show need that they can't pay for that fee, and there's the free and reduced applications is the process that we use, and so they have to fill out a form and go through the process, and then we decide whether they qualify or not. But we won't turn anybody away. So next steps. I talked about this. We got to continue what the state's going to do, not only on the foundation allowance, but on that retirement rate. Those are the two kind of unknowns at this point. We're meeting tomorrow with our administrators to finalize what that budget plan is and to actually look at what that dollar value of those 13 retirements. I will tell you that in addition to the 13, we got 4 folks as a part of a second phase of the retirement incentives that each district's got a certain amount of, we call them golden tickets, where you could get the same benefits of the retirement and actually wait a year to do that. So we had 4 teachers that we used, we had 4 and all 4 of them were used. So we actually had 17 teachers that submitted their retirements. Even though those 4 teachers aren't going to retire until a year from now, we at least have 4 retirements locked in for next year. So that's a good thing for next year's budget because we already know that we have some of those folks leaving. And we're actually looking at the staffing for this year and planning for those folks who are potentially leaving in a year and how we might plan for that now as we look at our staffing, hopefully not having to move folks around in a year from now.
That severance piece for those 4 golden tickets, will that hit? That won't hit for
Till next year, till a year from now. So there will be a reduction in that budget line item because we had 13 this year and we'll only have 4, at least to start with now. We could have more than that, but as we looked at our higher echelon of teachers of years of experience in that, after this 17 teacher retirement, there's really not a whole lot of teachers left to the extent that are eligible for retirement. So we were very fortunate to get a good chunk of those folks who were right on the fence and able to retire. So that was a positive thing for us. So we were happy about that. So in addition to that, school of choice, we're going to review that tomorrow, that 130 students that we have. We're going to look at that pool and see how much that could affect our enrollment. Then those 3 pieces, then we're going to have to decide, where do we think those numbers are going to land and how will that affect it, reducing that $430,000. And if we have to, we already have a page 2 out there, what additional cuts that we'll have to make. And so there again, rather than put out a balanced budget and have to have more layoffs, we opted to wait until we got good information before we put that budget together. So if we have to do that, we'll go to page 2, and we already have those out there. And then, as I mentioned, we'll meet with the board sometime over the summer to lay out what those changes will be, and we'll decide whether we're going to adjust it in a formal proposal in the fall or wait until the spring as we do our annual spring adjustment to the budget.
But you're suggesting, as we did last year, we take a look before school starts?
Absolutely. Yeah, and we'll probably have those numbers middle of July. As we look at school of choice and those types of things. Here's the other issues. You got some folks that'll commit to school of choice, and then at the last hour they'll leave. So we have to have at least some contingency of those school of choice numbers, and that might be positive, but we'll probably hold back a few because, like I say, we do know that some of those folks will at the last minute decide to go because they shop around. They put their application in multiple districts, and then if they get accepted in 2 districts, they have to decide who that's going to be in. One of those districts will have to take a hit there. So that's really kind of the summer plan. We feel very confident that we'll be able to reach that $437,000 mark without a whole lot of adjustments. And we were already, as you know, that $700,000 that we had with the 260, we are already into page 2 for part of that. So we feel pretty confident that we already have those things identified. And we do have some open positions, so we could always just decide not to fill positions. Either in the teaching ranks or some of those other secretarial positions or other types of positions that we know that we're going to be posting for here over the summer. So that's in a nutshell where we are. It's a little unusual to the extent that we've not passed a deficit budget to start with, but we feel that that's really the only way because we didn't, like I say, know what the numbers were going to be until last Friday of what those retirements were going to be. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I will say that the presentation and all the numbers will be out on the website tomorrow. I'll put all those presentations and all the packets that you have. So all the numbers will be out there. So if anyone wants to go out and look at those numbers, they'll be available hopefully tomorrow or sometime this week. So I'd be happy to answer any individual questions. It's been a very roller coaster year for budget, so it's not. And the other thing is I'd really like to thank all of our administrative team, all of our principals and administrators, both Sharon and Mike. We've been working on this for 6 months, and it's been up and down every day. It's changed. We spend probably at least an hour or 2 a day working on budget, meeting together to try to figure out where we're going to go with this. So I appreciate all the help that my colleagues have put into putting this together. So.
I have more comment than questions, but in addition to, I agree with you, thank everybody that's been working so hard. I think we need to thank our community for coming to all those meetings, filling out the survey, becoming educated on the whole budget process. And I wouldn't be surprised if you feel offended about the way it's all ending up. The fact that you invested hours reading or coming to meetings, and I just hope everybody knows that's still good, important information to learn, because although it sounds like, hooray, we've been able to step back from the cliff,
not a done deal.
all it's done is pushed out the cliff a little farther. and
Well, there's already been articles in the paper about some discussion about taking some money from the school
they're gonna do it.
fund to balance the general budget. I mean, it's, you know, this is, the handwriting was on the wall the minute you heard it, so we, you know, we still are not in a safe place,
No,
but.
we're not, and it's just, it's almost like a couple of years ago when things looked really bleak, and then all of a sudden we got the stimulus money, and that gave us all this day of execution. Well, we got, you know, a blip in sales tax, and actually, I think it's very positive that there were the retirement legislation. I mean, that shows that there's been some movement on some reforms, that perhaps there'll be movement on other reforms that'll help us in the long run, but it's really just kind of push things off, and it will still be a very important election, and it will be very important to listen to what all the candidates are saying, and they will all say, look, we didn't cut schools, we didn't have to cut schools, we protected schools. But to dig deeper and see, well, what are they going to do come January, when that money doesn't look like it's there anymore, how are they going to treat us? And that will be a challenge, but I think, again, our community has risen more than, you know, many to become educated and involved at this point, and I feel confident they still will.
I just have 2 words: double dip. We're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination, and you might not even have to wait till January. So, yeah.
I think he means 3 words.
It's a ray of sunshine. It's a very pleasant surprise, which was not expected. But by all means, all of the planning that went into it, and the contingencies, and the benefits we got on one-offs with more retirements than we anticipated. These are just one-time, non-reoccurring events. So we are very well prepared for the uncertainty that is still before us. And again, the community was very generous. They were very gracious in coming out and giving us the feedback. And we've taken that data and we've come up with a very good game plan.
I guess my encouragement, Steve, would be that there was a pretty vigorous conversation about continuing to look at ways to cooperate with other districts, to collaborate and save money. And I guess to some degree I'm fearful that finding a little bit of money takes all the wind out of that effort, and that we ought to be dedicated to continuing to find ways to collaborate and save money, because I agree with Chris. I think this is just a little bit of a
State of execution.
We're in school funding purgatory,
Yes,
is where we are
that's
right now.
exactly
And
right.
so you just never know which way it's gonna end up going.
Well, and we have been doing those collaborations over the last few years, you know, it's just, unfortunately, you
We've
don't
been
get.
doing it before.
Yeah, you don't
Before
necessarily always give the credit for those things, but the county is, the ISD's been a good leader in helping us do some of those things. You know, even next year in technology, we're looking at doing some collaboration on the things that we contract out for engineering services and such of those things that we're saving money in technology. So, I mean, it's just the tip of the iceberg of what we're going to see over the next few years. So.
Well, the other thing I think we've seen, and kind of goes to that as well, is that all these changes, whether it's being forced financially or because of retirements, you guys are stepping back and asking, well, do we want, or is there a reason to reinvent this in some way that's better for us all? Better for us financially, better for us, for the students, better for management, all the different pieces, and just, you know, just like you are doing, and that will have a benefit for us as well.
You know, I love the story about response to intervention. It's generated fewer students going to special ed as learning disabled, and therefore we don't have to have as much attention in that learning disabled area. That's just a terrific success story that has financial implications, but it's a great success story for the students. So thanks for sharing that. Any other questions? So this is our first look.
Yeah, this is actually our public hearing, so if anyone wants to make any comment at this point on the budget, this is where we kind of open it up for folks if they want to make any comments on the budget. Otherwise, on the 28th, we'll have the passing of the budget. So what we propose now will be passed on the 28th.
And anybody that wants to make a comment in between the meetings can contact through the administration office.
Yeah, and I'll have all, like I say, I'll have all the information on the website. Part of the State Aid Act that came through is what they call these transparency requirements. So we now have to put a lot of information on our website for a lot of our financial information, both salary and benefits and all those types of things. So there's a lot of information, so if people are interested, it's out there. So I welcome folks to look. So, thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, that brings us to board reports, and I think both committees have met, so let's start with Finance and Facilities.
Yes, we have met, and Mr. Casson and Mr. Cook just gave a report in great detail. We appreciate that, and although that's a big lip, it is also true. He just covered what we covered in committee and did it very thoroughly, so I don't really have anything to add to that.
And policy and personnel.
Well, Steve did it for our policy and personnel as well, and so you just heard the report that he gave us last week regarding the budget, and then we also talked about staffing, so I believe everybody's up to speed now.
Items from board members.
I had a chance to mention this to a couple of you before the meeting, but tomorrow, Mike and I will be going to the first ISD Consolidation Committee meeting, and I have the agenda and the beginning draft creation document or whatever. I'm sure there's a better word that I'm not thinking of, but if anyone else wants to see it before tomorrow, and I'm sure Mike and I will have something to report back next meeting. And then secondly, totally different subject, I just want to congratulate the girls varsity soccer team on their district championship, and they fell in the regional semifinals last week, but they had they did so to the reigning state championship team, which was very, very good, and had a very good season.
I just wanted to comment again one more time on the list of retirees that we had earlier listed. And anybody here that's familiar with any of those names knows that we're losing some really incredible people. And I hope they enjoy their retirement. And, you know, I hope that the people that fill their shoes understand just how special the people were that were there.
I'm actually glad you said that, because I think it's easy in the context of thinking about budget to rejoice.
Right.
But we are losing a lot of talent. I think it's really important to recognize that. And,
I don't begrudge, you know, the new coming in, but I just think we need to just honor the people that we have had for so many years who have done so much for this district.
anything else?
I have one item, and that is our administrators will participate in their annual retreat next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And it's an opportunity for us to start setting our goals for the 2010-2011 school year. So as a school board, if you have items that you'd like us to look at as an administrative team, I'd encourage you to pass those along to me. You have about we're not leaving until next Monday, so feel free to do so.
All right, we have a number of action items, 11 action items this evening, and this would be an opportunity for anybody to pull any of the items from the agenda. The 11th was at our place this evening. It's a tuition release request. All right, a motion to approve the action items.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the action items. I'll read what they are. They are approval of the minutes of the May 10th regular board meeting, approval of the minutes of the May 26th Policy and Personnel Committee meeting, approval of the minutes of the May 28th Finance and Facilities Committee meeting, approval of the minutes of the June 10th Policy and Personnel Committee meeting, and approval of the minutes of the June 14th Finance and Facilities Committee meeting. Our summer tax certification. Item 7 is our summer tax collection agreements. Item 8 is a layoff resolution for non-certified staff that Steve made reference to in the finance report. Number 9 is a layoff resolution for non-certified staff custodial. And number 10 is layoff resolution for non-certified staff secretarial. 3 groups that were mentioned. And the final is the tuition release request. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes. Announcements. Our next board meeting is June 28th, regularly scheduled here. And the meeting after that will be July 12th, which will be our organizational meeting for the next school year. Also here at 7 p.m. If nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
And a second?
Oh, yeah.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you.
No.
Aye.